I had covered this video topic a few years ago when I was just starting the channel, and I looked back at that video and I realized how horrendous it was, so hopefully this time I can go about the topic properly. Shounen vs Seinen is something that you hear often when people talk about their preferences in manga, and even though it's understandable, the way that it's done is completely mistaken, as they are defined and talked about as if they were genres of manga, and not what they actually are: demographics. Now, there are 5 major demographics when it comes to manga. There's children, shonen, seinen, shoujo, and josei. What essentially these are target audiences that magazines are catered towards, therefore the products or the series that are within these magazines are going to be directed at certain age groups. However, this has changed over time, and in reality, the more that I go into this, you'll kind of see the overall point of the video. Seinen manga could be tracked back to the 1850s, where it was a good amount of erotic stuff targeted towards young men and just men. And then later on in the 1890s is where shonen became more of a thing, targeted towards a younger demographic. Now later on in the 1960s is where we would get Astro Boy, the poster child of what shonen manga was really like at the time, given the god of manga himself, Osamu Tezuka. However, this whole sort of thing of shonen and seinen would become more defined within the modern era. However, again, I noticed a large issue in the way that people talk about this as if it was a genre of manga and not target demographics. To explain it, genres of manga would be things such as horror, action, romance, comedy, yaoi, slice of life, historical, sci-fi, yaoi. The more that you read, the more that you realize that series within these genres of manga can exist within any demographic, and that's based off of what magazine that it's published in. But why is it that I usually hear people talk about shonen, seinen, shoujo, josei, more specifically shonen and seinen, as genres and not demographics? Why did that happen? Could there be some sort of common denominator within the top-selling manga of all time that I could observe and pinpoint as to a possibility as to this giant misconception? I looked into it and I found something interesting. Out of all the series that have sold 20 million copies or more, 100 of them are shonen, 50 of them are seinen, 6 of them have been either both in shonen and seinen, a prominent example of that being JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, 5 of them targeted towards children, 21 of them being shoujo, only 2 of them being josei, 1 of them being both shoujo and josei, and this one series in particular was a shonen, shoujo, and josei. What an absolute whore. But nonetheless, this is too large of a sample size for me to find an answer, so I narrowed it down a bit. Series that have sold 50 million or more copies. Within that, there have only been 55 series ever to do so, 5 of them being other, which could be a combination of the two, shoujo, josei, children, 8 of them are seinen, and 42 of them are shonen. Take it even further, series to only sell 100 million or more copies, there are only 18 series. 2 of them being both, which again, JoJo's, 2 of them being seinen, one of those being Golgo 13, which has been going on since the 1960s, and 1 of them being a children's series, Doraemon, and the other 13 out of 18 series that have sold over 100 million copies are all shonen. In fact, if you were to narrow it even more, only 6 series have sold above 250 million copies, 4 of those being shonen. Now, there are a lot of variables that play into why shonen has dominated the top-selling manga of all time list, one of those being that I think it has an extremely friendly and flexible target demographic. Even though it's technically 13 to 18, as shonen does mean young boy, it is one of those things where, in reality, that's not a hard limit. Someone who enjoys a shonen at 18, it's most likely going to appeal to someone 20, 21, 22, 23, and a shonen that appeals to someone who is 12 or 13, it could still appeal to someone of much younger audiences. Series such as Dragon Ball should be a very great example of this. It's much more flexible in that, as well as on top of the fact that the majority of the most prominent anime adaptations, which is the largest form of promotion for manga, have all been for shonen. In fact, the best anime adaptations usually go to shonen series, and that just is what it is. Versus you take a good amount of seinen series, and due to their graphic content, it is extremely difficult to market towards younger demographics, or at least to the extent and the freedom that many shonen series have. But what's with the giant misconception regarding these terms? Where does that come from? I had a little bit of a theory beforehand that this simply had to do with the most prevalent and well-known series regarding these demographics, and to a certain degree I was right. When you look at the most popular shonen manga of all time, in that list you will find One Piece, Dragon Ball, Naruto, Slam Dunk, Demon Slayer, and Bleach. Go further down on the list, and you'll get things such as Fullmetal Alchemist, Gintama, Fairy Tail, Hunter x Hunter, Attack on Titan, etc, etc, etc. As for seinen, some of the most popular series of all time are Kingdom, Vagabond, and Berserk. Now, This is where I'm going with this. Given that these are the most popular series for their demographics, many people are going to be introduced to these demographics of manga and see them for the most popular series. Therefore, assume or lump in anything that is similar to these series in the same demographic. However, again, this is treating them like they're genres of manga and not target audiences. Let me give an example of how ridiculous this really is. For example, say you took a console, like the PlayStation 4, the PlayStation 5, whatever, and then you took a shoe, for example, like a Jordan or a Nike shoe or whatever the hell, and both of them happen to have the same target range audience of 13 to 18. You wouldn't look at those two products, and other than the fact that they share a similar target audience, you would not lump these two things together. However, we've done that with manga, and it's completely ridiculous. Oftentimes, I've heard people say, and I myself have said, that they prefer seinen manga to shonen manga. That's not true, or at least it's not entirely correct. You might actually prefer action horror series to comedy action series, or you might prefer thriller mystery to slice of life comedy. So the massive mistake that we have all made with this at some point or another is that we are taking these entire all-encompassing target demographics that have over dozens of different genres within them, and we compare it to another large all-encompassing target demographic that has the same sort of thing. It would be illogical to compare a horror series to a comedy series, so then why would you lump the two together in form of comparison? Again, I've made this mistake myself, as we as people tend to see little and say and think much. But in reality, what we are doing is encompassing all of these different things and comparing it to something else completely incorrectly. Again, these things are simply target audiences, and therefore it can mean nothing. If you want examples of this, Devilman in the 70s, although what could be seen as shonen and seinen at the time is very different from nowadays, Devilman classifies as a shonen because of the magazine it was in. Attack on Titan, one of the highest selling series of all time. Given the nature of the series, a lot of people would look at that, and because of the false assumptions of what shonen and seinen are, assume that Attack on Titan is a seinen when it is a shonen. One Punch Man, which is very similar to some of the highest selling, more prominent battle shonen series due to it being a mix of comedy, action, and superhero, something like My Hero Academia could be seen for, it could be lumped in the same demographic as My Hero Academia, when that is not the case. My Hero Academia is a shonen, One Punch Man is a seinen. So it's completely mistaken to say you prefer shonen to seinen or seinen to shonen. It's completely mistaken in the fact that in reality, you like the things that you've read, the seinen manga that you've read, more than the shonen manga that you've read. However, you could read a seinen manga that lies within specific genres such as slice of life comedy and not really like it, and then you could read a thriller horror that's in a shonen magazine and like it more than a seinen. So I think what's happened is people read a few series from either demographic and assume that's what the entire demographic represents, when again, that is completely mistaken. There are also some wild cards, such as things that are adapted from visual novels and anime originals. Those things don't pertain to either shonen or seinen because the source material was not manga. Fun fact, if it's a visual novel, there might be a high concentration of people from India that happen to be very interested in that, and if they say consumer of media at any point in their life, then it's a higher likelihood that they're from India. Shouts out to all the people who watch me from India. But nonetheless, I think it's become this thing that has been said often in this weird thing we do, and not just in the anime community, but in communities in general, where we're always trying to compare things instead of appreciating things for what they are. Instead of appreciating a horror series for being a horror series, we want to look at a horror series, a comedy series, compare the two, and then rank them for the sake of ranking and comparisons. Now, I know I have my whole top whatever list and all that, but in reality, I've always said those are more glorified lists and recommendations more than anything. In reality, it's this whole thing where we're so obsessed with this being better than this that we've lost perspective on just enjoying whatever the hell we want. And I think that in reality, in the long term, that leads to a lot of burnout and is extremely detrimental in the way that we look at different things and the way that we can enjoy them. I heard a really good quote recently that says, "Comparison is the thief of joy." And so, just be sure next time you go into a series, don't ever look at it for the target audience and demographic it has, and hell, not even for the genre that it might pertain to. You might read something new and like it. Hopefully this video might have cleared up any sort of misconceptions regarding this topic, and if you're new to the channel, consider liking as well as subscribing for some of your favorite anime and manga content. This has been The Masked Man. Everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.